In a lot of my daily conversations, I use the phrase comprehensive financial planning, and I use it a lot. And the reality is, unless you've been a part of a comprehensive financial plan or you've seen a financial plan, that term's pretty vague. And so I've been getting over the years a lot of questions of what that really looks like. So today I'm going to take you through parts of a comprehensive financial plan. And that's kind of the important phrase right there, parts of, because what we're not going to hit on are the other elements of financial planning that we connect with what I'm going to show you now. Things like estate planning. That's kind of a whole nother segment of financial planning. Also, income tax planning anymore is just an integral part of all of our planning disciplines that we do with our clients. Okay, so we are going to jump into our financial planning tool, and we're going to work with our fictional clients, Frank and Joanna Miller. So Frank and Joanna have specific financial assets that they have. They have a certain amount of income that they make, and then they've got their own tangible financial goals that they're trying to solve. So kind of substitute your life into Frank and Joanna's when you look at the tool, and I think that will give you a better sense of how the planning process can help you in your future-looking financial planning. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with what we call our facts section. And so I'm going to click in here, and we immediately go into family and friends. So what we learn is that Frank is 57 years old, and we have a target retirement age of age 65 and an expected life expectancy of 100 years old. So Joanna, on the other hand, is 56, also the same retirement age, and she also expects to live to 100. Now, a lot of times people say, I'm not going to live to 100 or I'm not going to live to 95. And maybe you won't. But in America today, we do tend to live longer than previous generations. And what I would tell you from a planning standpoint, it's really a good idea to make your plans conservative enough that if you do live that long, that you don't run out of money. So it's good to probably over plan a little bit in here. Now, this is a great place to look at your own health history, your family pool, so your gene pool, how long did your parents live? How long did your grandparents live? That can help at least shape an idea of what's possible. But I think absolutely your personal health choices, those kind of things are really vital. But that's the situation for Frank and Joanna. Now, they also have 3 children. One's an older adult child, 27. Another is 13, and then another is 11, and then they have some extended family. So then we have goals. So Frank and Joanna would both like to retire at age 65, and they expect that when they are 65, that they would like to have $100,000 of general retirement spending. Now that's in today's dollars. So here we are in 2021, when they are 65 down the future, that $100,000 will need to be a bigger number because things get more expensive over time. But for our purposes, this is a good way to look at it. Is all we can think about right now is what it costs today. So that's how we show that retirement goal. Then we show Mary Beth. She has a retirement goal, or I'm sorry, a college goal of going to Northwestern University in the state of Illinois. That's up in Evanston, Illinois. And it's a very expensive private school. And she will be a freshman in the year 2026. And she's expected to get completed in 4 years. And the cost of education right now is $78,654 per year. Now, our program actually goes in and grabs the current cost of education and looks at room and board and all that, and that's what that number represents. Then Lucas wants to go to the Ohio State University, and he will be a freshman in 2028. He'll need 4 years of education, and his cost looks to be more like $49,000 per year. And then in Frank and Joanna's case, they said they're not too worried about if they leave a legacy behind. If they have to spend all their money to fund all of their goals, they're okay with that. That's a great planning consideration for you. Some people say, hey, I'm the same way as Frank and Joanna. Others go, oh no, I really want to leave a significant sum of money behind to charity or to family, and we can certainly make plans for that as well. So now that we know a little bit about Frank and Joanna, we know what their goals are, it's important that we benchmark where they are now financially. So this is where we go into the net worth and we look at what instruments or assets that they have. So they have a bank account, they have a cash account at Vanguard, they've got an investment account with some stocks and bonds and other things in it. Frank has a 401k at work. Joanna has a tax sheltered annuity, a 403b. And then she also has a Roth IRA, and this says converted. So she would have converted that from an IRA, paid tax on it, and put it into a tax free Roth IRA. And that's where, kind of remember, we weave in tax planning in all of this because we think that that's a vital part of the planning process, not just today, but for looking, we think that that's a really big deal. Okay, so you can see the dollar amounts listed here. And then you'll notice that we also are focusing on who owns these assets. Now, this is where we do start to cross over and start thinking also about estate planning. So all through the planning process, all of these things are connected and we're addressing different things with the different elements of the plan. Now, in addition to the Roth IRA, Frank has a whole life cash value insurance policy. And what's reflected on this screen is the cash value. This is not the death benefit if he would pass away. That's in a different part of the plan. They also have their primary residence, and then they have a vacation home, and then they have some vehicles and some jewelry. And then from a debt standpoint, their house has a mortgage of $426,000, and then they have a credit card with about $3,600 on it. Now, notice down here, out of estate. What's that mean? Well, that's where we capture assets like the kids' 529 college plans. Technically, Frank and Joanna don't own those anymore. They're making gifts to those, and those are for the benefit of the kids. So for estate purposes, that's why we call it out of the estate. So the kids each have 529 plans with some money in those. All right, so now we've benchmarked where they are now financially. The other element we want to look at is income. So Frank makes $300,000 a year, and Joanna works part-time, making $50,000 per year. And then we've got at age 65 projections of their Social Security amounts, and you'll see Frank has a benefit of $34,000, and then Joanna has about $17,000 per year. And then Joanna's work at the hospital affords her a pension that at age 65 will pay her $1,000 a month or $12,000 per year. So now we have their income figures while they're working toward retirement. Then we have income at retirement in the form of Social Security and pension income. The final ingredient that we really need to look at are their expenses. So we're going to go in here and look and just see what other expenses do we need to plan for. So when we look at expenses, we look at current spending. And in their case, we're saying that they're spending $140,000 a year for just general living. But you may recall under the goals tab, at retirement age, they'd like to have $100,000 per year. But they speculate when Frank turns 90, the cost of living will go down a little bit. So they think that their spending will go down by about $10,000 a year when Frank is 90. Now, when you're thinking about retirement, $100,000 a year, but that's not all of the spending in the plan. We then add to that any debts that they have, so the mortgage and the credit card are reflected. We also have the goals for the kids' college education at their respective freshman years for the 4 years of education. Then we add in any insurance costs that they have now and will have in the future. Okay, so we have all of these spending items. And then the last, and it's not really spending, but we definitely want to think about what they're saving for the retirement. And that falls under the contribution area. and Frank is putting 10% into his 401k. His company is putting a match in there. And then Joanna's putting 7% in, and the company's also doing a match, but in their case, they're matching just half of what Joanna's putting in. Okay, so now we've got a great foundation. We know a lot about Frank and Joanna, what they have, kind of substitute what Frank and Joanna have, and think about these very same things for your life. You're not going to have the same things that Frank and Joanna have. You're not going to have the same Social Security amounts. This is where we want to individualize this. We want to really perfect this for your situation. Now, once we know that, let's try to find some results. Where are Frank and Joanna? We know a lot about them, but we still don't know anything about, are they very close to accomplishing their goals? Now, you may look at it on the surface, you may think, hey, I bet they're doing great. Or you may look and think, man, those goals are hefty. There's no way they're going to make it. Well, this is where the planning discipline comes in. So we're going to click on the plans section, and we're going to go into this section we call advanced planning. And I'm going to hit on this little graph right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is when the graph comes up, I'm going to turn off all of what we call techniques. So I'm going to turn all these off. And under the base financial plan, I'm going to go into what we call present value. So present value, what that means is down the road in the plan, and I'll explain here in a little bit more about this, the dollars have been converted back to what a value of a dollar is today. Now, you can kind of think about this. Postage stamps. When we were all kids, postage stamps were, 1 cent, 3 cents, 5 cents, somewhere in, 10 cents. And then over time, those postage stamps have risen to the point that they're whatever they are today, 51 cents, So that's inflation. That's just the mysterious inflation that where everything gets more expensive. So in future value terms, the dollars will be bigger, but it's kind of healthy to get things converted back to what we know a value of a dollar is today. So I'll try to explain that more in a second. But when you look at this graph, what this is what we would call a straight line assumption. So some of the kind of easy, free calculators on the internet, this is all they're going to do. Now, they're probably not going to be this robust either, by the way. We've kind of gotten a lot more granular. We have Social Security built into this. We've got all kinds of special spending items addressed. So there's a lot of robust planning here, but it's still using what we would kind of call entry-level planning. And that's all the online free calculators are going to do is just give you essentially a straight line assumption. And what I mean by straight line is they're going to take a rate of return the way your money is invested. And it's just going to say for the rest of your life, that rate of return is going to be earned. And there's no fluctuations in that. And now we all probably know that's fantasy, right? Because what do the investment markets do? They go up and they go down and do all this. Over the long haul, they go up, but they don't do it in a straight line. But this is a great way to at least get a sense of where you are. So on the graph, what we say is this. We take what you have right now, in this case, Frank and Joanna have $1.4 million of cash and investments. This is not the house, it's not the car, it's not the vacation home. And what we are suggesting here is until they get to 65, they're going to keep accumulating money, and they're going to get to the point where they grow their assets to about 2 million, 2.1 million. Then they shift into retirement mode and they start spending the money. And this is making an assumption that over the course of their lives, until you get out here to their ages 100, in this case, that line, that 2065, then there's a dash, that's saying Frank actually passed away. Joanna's going to be 100 a year later, so that's her age. So at age 100, we're suggesting here that Joanna will have about $245,000 of cash and investments left over. Okay, so the good news is she's not out of money. Bad news is if anything kind of goes wrong along the way, that's not a lot of what we would call a safety margin. the chance of her money or her plan running out of money, I suspect, is fairly high. Well, how do we really quantify that? How do we measure that? Well, we then go to something we call Monte Carlo. This is where the computer runs 1,000 simulations. So it runs 1,000 models of real stock market history, and it does a forecast of, in these different outcomes, how likely does the plan make it? Now, we generally want to see a plan that gets at least an 80% probability of success. And down here, what you find out is this plan has about a 68% probability of success. So it's not quite as robust and strong as we might like. And then we use another tool where we use Monte Carlo, but we use longevity risk. Now, this is the real risk that we all have. It's if we live too long and we don't have enough money. And kind of like the street lights show us, green is good, yellow is cautionary, and red's kind of problem. It's kind of stop. Well, what this is suggesting, and it's probably makes sense, the chance of you running out of money is highest down there in those latter years where 95 to 100, Frank and Joanna's plan becomes pretty stressed. That's where the risk is, and that kind of makes a lot of sense, I think. But that's just the surface. That's the base planning. So then what we do is we say, all right, well, what if Frank and Joanna aren't satisfied with that answer and they want to see their plan have a stronger probability of success? So a couple of things that they want to model is they said, all right, at some point in the future, we want to sell our vacation house. So I'm actually going to go in here and turn this on, and we're actually going to build this together. We're going to say, okay, we're going to sell the vacation house. And in this case, we're going to say they're going to sell it, and we're going to sell it in 2030, let's say. And right now, the price estimate is going to be $350,000. And we're going to say that they're going to take that, sell it, and then take the proceeds and just put it back into the plan. So right away, you see this green bar that surfaces. And what that's telling you now is before at age 100, Joanna in this scenario was going to have around $245,000. Now it's showing $647,000. That's a lot better. Now, what does that do for us from a probability of success standpoint? We're going to look down here after the computer runs the simulations. So assuming that $350,000 is put in the market, that does a substantially good job on the longevity risk. It takes that and makes it all look really good. And then it goes in and says 83% probability of success. So it's still not, you can't go, it's a perfect no risk plan. It is saying it's got a really, really high probability of success, though. And that's exciting. Now, Frank and Joanna then said, well, we're also thinking we might want to work later. So what if we work until 68 for Frank and 67 for Joanna? And you're going to find that that's going to make a pretty sizable difference. It's not just a few more years of work, it's a few more years of not spending your investments to live on. It has a great multiplying effect. And so you can see it adds a lot of value to the plan, and it's really going to ratchet up that probability of success to a very comfortable number, 98%. So that's a really good plan. Now, final thing I just thought I'd show you. They also are getting a little more pessimistic that Social Security is going to be as viable for them. They've read all the news accounts and they hear all the political wrangling about Social Security. And so what they just said is, let's make the assumption that somehow we're not going to get 33% of our Social Security. So about a third taken away from them. Maybe it's tax, maybe it's reduced benefit, who knows? Just they don't want to plan on getting all of their Social Security. And I think that's a healthy thing to do, is look at things that might happen. Maybe they won't, but if they do, I want to know how likely it's going to affect me or how much it will affect me. So we have this really robust plan. Now we're going to turn and say Social Security is not going to be as strong. That's going to be a takeaway. It's going to ratchet down the safety margin a bit more, but it still looks awfully healthy. And then when you add all three of those different strategies or techniques together and do the Monte Carlo, you're going to see a probability of success factoring in all three of those. And I think you're going to still find a pretty strong financial plan, 91%. So all in all, still a very, very good plan. That's just an example. We can do a lot of what we call what if planning. So a lot of times folks will come in and say, what if I buy a second home? What if I buy a vehicle every so many years? What if we're going to do some home improvements? What if we're going to do some part-time work? What if I retire earlier and have to pay for health insurance until I'm Medicare eligible? This is where this becomes very individualized and you really custom build your financial plan. And to me, this is where comprehensive planning really ought to start. And notice, we haven't talked about investing or any of that. Those are obviously key parts of the planning process. But what's great is what we now know is if we have these results, we are starting to get a sense of how much money we need for these goals. That way we can back into what type of investment results that we need. And then if we know that, it's very easy then to pick what type of investments we need to own to achieve those kind of returns. From that, we talk about insurance, we talk about income taxes, we talk about estate planning. All of those things then get built out around this core comprehensive financial plan. So I hope this gives you some insight, a bit more on what the planning process looks like, what a really comprehensive plan can do for you, and the questions it can answer. Certainly, let us know if we can answer any questions for you. Obviously, on our webpage, you can go and look at some of these tools that we have, and then you can also schedule a meeting if you'd like to learn more about the planning process.